from the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I'll make a presentation, I understand, which is 10 minutes, and basically we'll look at the capital markets and the regulatory insights. I'll depend on the colleagues to help me with controlling the screen. So maybe you can scroll to the next slide. Okay, so I'll basically talk about what the SEC is all about, then the role of the capital markets, and then capital raising from the capital markets. And then lastly, I'll talk about our education and awareness interventions. Next slide, please. So the Securities and Exchange Commission is a creature of Parliament created by the Act of Parliament, which is Cap 354 of the laws of Zambia. And this was continued under the Securities Act number 41 of 2016 and as amended by the Securities Act number 21 of 2022. So the SEC is the apex regulator of capital markets in Zambia, and there are three financial sector regulators in Zambia. We have the Bank of Zambia, we have the Pensions and Insurance Authority, and then we have the Securities and Exchange Commission. So the way the financial services sector is aligned is that the Bank of Zambia looks at the financial markets, regulating the banks, while the Pensions and Insurance Authority looks at the pensions and insurance, while the SEC, which is ourselves, we look at the capital markets. So the Securities and Exchange Commission actually has a dual mandate. This mandate has to do with investor protection and then capital markets development. So when we talk about investor protection, we are talking about protecting all the investors that do invest on the capital markets or who do invest in securities. And then on the other hand, the mandate is to develop the capital markets. Our vision is to be a dynamic regulator of capital markets that is a preferred destination for investment. And our mission or our mission statement is basically to safeguard the interests of those investors and promote the growth of capital markets for both individuals and institutions for national prosperity. So in a nutshell, that's what the Securities and Exchange Commission is about. Next slide, please. So in terms of regulation or the regulatory framework, as I indicated, we created by Act of Parliament under the Securities Act number 41 of 2016 as amended by Act number 21 of 2022. We have equally subsidiary legislation which helps us to regulate the market effectively, and this is the Securities Conduct of Business Rules and other subsidiary regulations. Also, worth noting that the Securities and Exchange Commission issues directives, guidelines, notices, and circulars to the public in line with its regulatory mandate, and is a member of international standard-setting bodies such as the IOSCO and the Financial Action Task Force. Next slide. So now, the regulatory framework of the capital markets, we have the government of the Republic of Zambia, which gives the policy direction through the National Development Plan. Currently, we have the 8th National Development Plan together with the Millennium Development Goals, or the MDGs, and the Vision 2030. So the government, from those national documents or frameworks, they do give us policy direction in terms of how we are to protect and develop the market. So the SEC sits there as a regulator. So what we regulate, we have what are called issuers, or those that have issued securities, and these include companies and other entities such as municipalities. Then in terms of the investors who bring in cash, we have pension funds, we have institutions, as well as individuals. And then we have the exchange, or the exchanges. So in terms of the exchanges, we had 3 exchanges, 2 of which the licenses have been revoked, but now we only have 1 exchange in operation, and that is the Lusaka Securities Exchange, or the LUSE. So the LUSE is the exchange or the platform where all securities are traded. And then to deal on the LUCE, you can't deal directly. You need to go through what are called brokers or dealers, investment advisors, and representatives. So that is how the market is structured. Next slide. So from the LUCE, of course, I understand we are discussing the growth of SMEs, entrepreneurship, even with large corporates. But then I thought include this slide for the purposes of the SMEs and the discussions that I had an opportunity to listen to a while ago, or the one that just ended. So in terms of the LUCE is our market, as I've indicated. That is the exchange on where we can trade. So there are advantages for micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as SMEs, how they can access capital. So the capital that you can access from the LUCE is the long-term capital, and this is affordable long-term funding without short-term repayment pressures. I know for SMEs, the traditional financing part is to go to the bank, get a loan, which is good and important, but then there are other alternatives which can be used in terms of raising these funds. So SMEs can take advantage of this. You go through a broker or a dealer to try and raise capital from the capital markets. Then listing is very important in that it gives business an advantage of quality and transparency. As you may know, for you to list, and basically maybe just for the information of the audience, we've got two listing boards. We have what is called the main board, where we have 22 listed companies, and we've got an alternative market where we have one company, which is a .com, where we list probably SMEs, or where SMEs are expected to list. But nevertheless, the requirements which are required enables investors to have confidence in the company if they want to invest in. For example, SMEs will be required to have audited financial statements. That is very critical for investors in their decision making, as well as governance structures such as boards being separate from management and so on. Then this also provides liquidity for shareholders, as well as the existing shareholders gaining a pathway, making equity stakes attractive to the investors. Then in terms of investor network, it also provides or affords this access to actually showcase your business and be looked at by other investors. Next slide, please. So the next slide basically talks about SMEs listing on the alternative market, and to be described as an SME from the LUCE perspective. Of course, I know there are other criteria for describing who an SME is, but for the purposes of listing on the Lusaka Securities Exchange, any company that has got turnover of 250,000 to 20 million can be considered to be an SME. And if you are falling within that category, then you can actually come to market and then list on the alternative board. I should mention actually that as a commission, we've incentivized the listing on this board, where some of the requirements which are seen as burdensome for SMEs have been waived, such as registration fees. So currently, the Commission is not charging any fees on those that want to come to market, and this has been given to the first 10 SMEs that would be coming to market. And this is in order to encourage our SMEs and our entrepreneurs to take advantage and raise capital from this market. And as a result of that, we've actually seen .com, the one I talked about, being the only company in Zambia that is listed on the alternative market. It has actually grown. Currently, I was trying to check the current market cap for them. They are now slightly over $1 million company. So you can imagine, before they came to market, they were basically below 20 million kwacha. But today, as we speak, they've got over 1,000 shareholders, and they are seated on a market capitalization that is over $1 million. So the question is, should you keep 100% of your SME business, which is probably worth 20 million, or should you come to market, have more investors, and then it becomes a $1 million company? And this is a success story that we can actually check and look out for, the .com. And then in terms of employees, of course, the criteria is 20 to 150 staff. Then minimum shares in terms of equity, 500. Minimum that has to be offered to the public is 10%. This is where we've seen actually most of the SMEs are not so much willing to dilute their shareholding. So like I'm indicating, maybe as Zambians would rather have 100% of 20 million than 10% in a $1 billion company. But maybe that's those are the conversations we need to have, so that then we see how best we can tap into this market. So in terms of shareholders, the requirement is that we need to have 30 as a minimum. And then in terms of operations, at least between 5 and 3 years, and there should be audited financial statements. This is key for governance and also key in order to attract investment from other investors. Next slide, please. So the other slide is basically talking about how you can access. So of course you review the previous slide, which I've talked about, and then you engage a broker. Like I indicated, to operate on this market, you cannot go directly. You need to be represented by a dealer or an investment advisor or a broker. And these are available from our website. You can check, and then you can raise your capital, grow, and ensure that your business grows. Next slide. So in terms of the capital markets, how we see them, so we see capital markets actually as an enabler of greater and sustainable financial inclusion. So what do we mean? So what we mean is that as a commission, we're trying to have everybody included, whether it be SMEs or indeed large corporates. We are all to be part of this, in the sense that the commission is an enabler of sustainable financial inclusion. Then this will lead to long-term financing. So as I've indicated, there are various modes of financing, which includes borrowing from the bank, but this one involves getting to the public and then diluting your shareholding to invite others to participate in the business. Then there are also alternative investment vehicles that we have, such as collective investment schemes, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, and other methods that the Commission is regulating. Then this eventually leads to job creation, and it will be good for our country. Next slide. Okay, so the capital market as enabler process, you could see we have retail investors as well as institutional investors. So from the retail investors, we've got investments where we have the collective investment scheme and private bonds, including corporate bonds. Then from the institutions, there are equities, innovation products, and we have what we are calling a sandbox. So a sandbox basically is a regulated environment where we test innovative and technologically enabled products. I think there were discussions to do with the AI, the technology, and so on. So we in the financial services sector do also realize and recognize that there are actually fintechs or financial technology which is shaping the way the financial sector is. So if you look at maybe 10 years ago, nobody was transacting on, let's say, mobile money. But today, we literally are moving with our banks on our phone. And that technology, we do equally recognize it. And for those products that are highly innovative and we are not sure of them, they are being tested in a controlled environment, which is called a sandbox. As you can see from the slides, then this goes to spur investments in critical sectors of our economy, including agriculture, mining, financial services, and also the SMEs and large corporates getting involved. Then it will mean that I will grow our market and actually we'll have more investors on the market. Next slide. So that is just to, sorry, I'm going very fast because I don't even know whether I've exhausted my 10 minutes, but trying to summarize. I will be summarizing soon. So that is basically the universe, or that's a cluster of the universe in which we operate. Next slide. Okay, so maybe I'll try to summarize from here in terms of capital raising. So capital raising is one of the major things that the Commission does. And you can go to the next slide. In terms of how you can raise capital on the capital markets, this is guided by the law. And in terms of us, it is the Securities Act, as I indicated, and those are the requirements, but I know I can't go through very quickly or gloss over. We still around, we are actually exhibiting. Please find time to pass through our stand so that some of these could actually be explained in more detail. So those are some of the requirements that we require even as we do the registration of securities. So all securities in Zambia have to be registered by the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they have to be done in a prescribed form and format. And this would be in conformity with this section 75. Next slide. So the next slide is basically the role of the Commission in supporting issuers. So basically, when you are coming to market, we do provide regulatory oversight and guidance. We'll guide you through the process, and we will ensure that we facilitate this capital raising. We'll continue with our mandate of investor protection to create confidence and market integrity. Then we continue to do education and awareness through our market development. And this continuous education and awareness is important, especially with our financial technologies, where we've seen blockchain technologies emerging, where a lot of people have lost money, a lot of people have been scammed. I'm sure each one of us could have heard at one point or the other how people are losing millions of kwachas. Next slide. Okay, so this is basically a typical capital raise. We have an IPO, which is an initial public offer, and then we've got a private placement. But for the sake of time, I can skip this slide. Okay, even this one, I think we can skip. Okay, so this is basically showing us a registration process of what you need to go through. So it's basically a very simple process. This diagram basically summarizes what everything else is about, of what we skipped. So there will be an application that will require either from it be institutions or individuals. Then the application will be reviewed. Then we have the market transactions committee that looks at this, prepares the report, and then it goes to the board. It's quite a seamless process guided by the law, and it has got a deeming clause in the law. Within 90 days, the application should be done. Next slide. We can also go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, this talks about continuing obligation. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, that slide talks about a summary of what are called continuing obligations. So there are companies that are listed and quoted. So for the listed companies, including those that are on the alternative market, there are continuous obligations that we expect. One of those is AGMs. We expect, because of governance, that the companies will be holding their AGMs, they will be having their audited financial statements, they'll be preparing their annual reports, and indeed they will be sharing the board meetings and resolutions. So that governance structure I talked about is critical for all that are on the market. Next. Okay, so these are common issues with the registered securities, but we go to the next. Okay, so in terms of investor protection, probably I think I'll end from here because of time. So in terms of our other core mandates, I've talked about investor protection, which basically means that our role is to protect investors from misleading and manipulative practices by ensuring that there is full disclosure of materials information for investors to make informed decisions. So even as investors will be investing in securities, we ensure that the information getting to investors for their investment is accurate and there is nothing material that is not being disclosed. Then we also ensure that the markets are efficient, fair, and transparent, and no information asymmetry is there, but that all material information, including price-sensitive material, is adequately disclosed. Then the reduction of systemic risk. Okay, so we ensure that there's effective management of risk through our risk-based supervision, and this seeks to reduce impact of failure. So in a nutshell, the Commission, as I said, dual mandate, market development, as well as investor protection. And I know I've run quite fast through this material, but as I've indicated, we are still there. There's just one slide I would like to show. Maybe just go on. Again, go. I think it should be a slide towards the end. Again. Yeah, this slide. I thought maybe I just speak to it briefly. This is part of our education and our awareness. As I've indicated, there is a lot of fraud and scams that are happening, even as we advance with our technologies. So using blockchain technologies, there are a lot of issues that are happening. So in the period under review, maybe in the last quarter, we've had over 1,124 scams recorded, okay? And you'd see that about 38 million kwacha has been lost through such kind of scams. So the Commission continues to sensitize the public through the print media and also our other platforms in ensuring that the public is aware of these scams. We continue to collaborate with law enforcement agencies to ensure that culprits who perpetrate these are brought to book, and we continue to roll out education and awareness campaign. So you could see that a lot of people and suspecting members of the public do lose money, but please be on the lookout for the Commission.
Thank you so much for that very enriching presentation. We can't exhaust everything in an environment like this, but then it helps you to know in the next few days which stands you need to visit and ensure that you can get the bigger benefits of the Zambia International Trade Fair. We are now moving on to our last presentation, which is a panel discussion on youth empowerment. Our moderator for this is Lenet Kanso Mwamba Mwenya. She's a legal practitioner and certified mediator. She's passionate about facilitating meaningful conversations through dialogue, and she brings to this conversation professionalism, insights, and energy. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mwamba Mwenya to come and introduce her panel.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to write on the protocols already observed here. Welcome to panel 3 this afternoon of the Zambia International Trade Fair Business Forum on Youth Empowerment and Business. Today's discussion is about moving from ideas to action. Many young people have brilliant business ideas, but questions often rise. Where do I start? How do I register my business? Where do I find financing? What taxes do I pay? How do I protect my innovations? Fortunately, today we have representatives from institutions that can answer these questions. And together, we are going to have this discussion and enjoy ourselves and learn a thing or two. Allow me to welcome my panelists today. We have a representative from Citizens Economic